Pride is on the decline, and Boise Pride is feeling it. Plus, Boise gets a new $5.8 million air wildfire firefighting center. And we break down Hegseth and Doug Wilson's biblical voting controversy, and two families of the Moscow murder victims fight to keep the crime scene photos sealed. This is the Yocal, Idaho Midweek Report, where we give you an overview of the news you need to know in Idaho for the last week. Also, happy Labor Day. I hope you had a wonderful 3-day weekend, or 4 if you were able to take a little bit extra time off. I got to go enjoy some hiking. Also, later on in the episode, if you didn't hear, the historic highway signs in Idaho, the brown wooden ones you'll see along the roads when you're traveling, you get to stop. Usually there's some rather scenic views with them. They're getting updated, end quote on that exact wording. We'll look at why this should concern you later on in the episode, so stick with us to that point. And don't you skip to it. It's a well-crafted episode. Also, to get full coverage on all these wonderful stories we'll talk about and more, go to our website to ensure you're the most informed Idahoan in the room, and hit that subscribe button as well so you can have all of our wonderful video content if you're watching us on YouTube, Rumble, or X. With all that out of the way, let's get into the first story. This weekend, Boise hosts its 36th annual Pride Festival at Ann Morrison Park. But the event is facing some serious challenges that are also affecting a lot nationwide. Organizers cut the festival from 3 days to 2 after corporate sponsors pulled about $190,000 in funding. Oucho. That raised only $250,000 this year compared to last year, which was $440,000. That's a little bit of a steep drop-off. The struggle started earlier when organizers canceled their June kickoff event due to poor ticket sales. We talked about that, I think, on episode 70. Who knows? Maybe we'll see. The editor can, do something funny if I actually got it or not. Due to the poor ticket sales, if you remember, festival president Michael Dale admits, quote, "This year has been tough for us," end quote, and that they've seen, quote, "quite a change in support," end quote. Major Idaho companies like Micron and Simplot, who love to fly that pride flag usually, are no longer sponsoring the event. Only Albertsons remains the presenting sponsor, take with that information as you will, with Fred Meyer providing additional support. The funding shortage forced organizers to book smaller headliners, use a smaller stage, and scale back decorations, because, when you're on a budget. This also reflects a national trend where corporate America is recoiling back from Pride events and things like it. Companies cited budget concerns, but many observers point to the growing public pushback against these divisive celebrations. As for the event itself, it'll start Saturday and run from 11 a.m. to 9:15 p.m., ending with fireworks. And then Sunday features the parade at 10 a.m., followed by festival activities until 5 p.m. The funding decline offers hope for protecting vulnerable community members from harmful ideologies. I don't think any of us would say that this is good for them. As corporate America steps back from these divisive events, Idaho can focus on returning to the healthy Christian traditions that built our state's and the nation's foundations. And speaking of things that are not good for us and protecting against them, our state became the center of fighting wildfire across the Pacific Northwest this last month. The Bureau of Land Management has been working on a $5.8 million air center at the Boise's National Interagency Fire Center. I feel like that would be a massive acronym. It will house both air attack planes and helicopter programs under one roof. Currently, these important programs operate from separate locations, which, if you've ever tried to coordinate with your family over group text for stuff at the grocery store, it's a little hard, makes it difficult to coordinate for them when fires break out. Marshall Thompson from NIFC explains they, quote, "saw a need and an opportunity to move both programs into one location," end quote, where crews can better coordinate their efforts. This matters because air attack planes serve as eyes in the sky for military stuff, guiding large tankers and helicopters exactly where ground crews need them most. The helicopter teams are actually quite dynamic on this. They can drop off firefighters and then quickly switch to more suppressive roles with water buckets to douse flames. The facility will open by December of 2025 if everything goes on schedule, the government, and feature offices, mechanical bays, and direct runway access. While crews based here in Boise might deploy anywhere to fight fire threats, this positions Idaho as a key hub for protecting the entire region. Dobson says this represents just the beginning. More facilities like this might follow. This means more jobs for the Treasure Valley and better fire protection for families across our state. Hey, one second. You clicked on a video about stuff in Idaho. Probably means you like to learn about Idaho. I don't think it's a far guess for me to say that. If so, make sure to subscribe and also follow us so you don't miss out on any of our future Idahoan content, so you can be the real smart Idahoan in the room. And going a little bit national, but also very connected here to Idaho, last month, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth stirred up a massive controversy when he reposted a CNN, they're actually trying to turn things around there, video featuring Idaho's own Doug Wilson from Moscow. If you don't quite know Doug Wilson, you'll find out about him here in a second. Wilson discussed how Christians should approach voting, and Hegseth simply added, "All of Christ for all of life," end quote. The post exploded with over 5.4 million views and thousands of angry responses. In the video, Wilson explained the biblical views that households should vote as units, with husbands leading after discussing issues with their wives and families. His associate pastor, Jared Longshore, even said he'd support repealing the 19th Amendment because our current system divides families against themselves. As you can probably guess, critics went ballistic, or you might be on the other side of the screen depending on your ideology, calling these views disturbing and demanding resignations. However, what they overlook is that these principles aren't something new at all. They guided America's founding generation for centuries. Wilson isn't changing his position. America has simply drifted from its Christian foundations. The fierce backlash proves how far we've moved from biblical truth. When government leaders like Hegseth openly support Christian principles, it is bound to shock people raised in a purely secular assumptions, namely the public school system. Idaho continues to lead this Christian renewal, which is encouraging to see. Wilson's Moscow ministry now influences national leaders and plants churches nationwide. To check out our full article on this and a complete breakdown of the important debate about faith, family, and voting, you can find a link to it in the description. And speaking of families and Christian principles, namely what is the function of a thing, two of the families involved in the 2022 Moscow murders, man, time is flying, are asking a judge to stop the city from releasing more crime scene photos and videos. The families of Madison Mogan and Ethan Chapman say the images traumatize them and violate their privacy, even though police blurred the victims' bodies. After Bryan Kohberger received his life sentence, you may remember, Moscow released the materials following the public records request that they received. The city says Idaho's law requires them to balance the victim's privacy against the public's right to know. But the images still show blood on the floor and walls, and recordings that include sounds of friends sobbing. Ethan's mother, Stacy Chapman, wrote that even redacted images, quote, are heartbreaking and continue to reopen a wound that has yet to heal, end quote. The family's attorney criticized what he called the commodification of the killings, end quote, by the true crime industry. Judge Morgan Marshall extended a temporary order blocking more releases while she considers the case. This battle highlights a deeper question you may or may not have already gotten to. What good does these images actually serve being released? The case was solved, justice was delivered, and Kohberger has been sentenced. The photos satisfy curiosity more than serve any public purpose of accountability to the government. Sometimes protecting human dignity matters more than feeding the public's appetite for gruesome details. If you've enjoyed the stories we've talked about so far, do us a favor and hit the like/subscribe and follow buttons. It helps us stay connected with you and reach more folks who love Idaho just like yourself. Now, speaking of records and keeping the government accountable, you've probably seen those all familiar brown signs along our highways that tell Idaho stories. They usually are made out of wood and have some really scenic views. Well, they're getting their first major updates in decades. More on the update part. The Idaho Transportation Department, working with the State Historical Society and Visit Idaho, plans to refresh all highway markers statewide by 2027. But looking at those upgrades, the physical ones sound great. They're getting new symbols for them, QR codes to link to a mobile app with information in 9 languages, assuming you actually have cell service where you find these, because they do have a habit of being in some remote areas. And for that, they're also going to be getting some better weather resistance. North Idaho will see the changes first, with District 1 completed by the end of this year. So if you see some new signs up there, do send us some photos of it. We would love to share those around. But that brings us to the concern here that should be raised by most of us. Historians are revising the actual historical content of each marker, claiming they're correcting outdated information and adding overlooked perspectives. The Historical Society says they're, quote, deepening our understanding through research at the local level. In today's culture, where activism pushes to reframe American history through an anti-American lens, we need to ask, what standards are these updates following? Will they preserve our actual heritage or filter our history through modern political correctness? The promise of local-level research offers hope that we Idahoans maintain control over our history. But given the current climate we see in culture, we should pay close attention to how our state's history gets retold. Trump is definitely doing that with the Smithsonian. To check out our full article for a more in-depth breakdown of this and what's happening with these signs, you can find it down in the description below. And speaking of remote areas, but in good news, our fellow Idahoans in Owyhee County just made history. The Shoshone-Paiute tribes signed the first agreement of its kind in the lower 48 states, with the Canadian mining company Integra Resources for the Del Mar Gold and Silver project. After 5 years of talks, both sides crafted something no one has achieved before on federal managed lands. A partnership that recognizes tribal sovereignty while moving forward with the responsible use of natural resources. Now here's what makes the deal really special. The tribes don't just get jobs. On that though, the project will create between 350 to 400 construction jobs and 350 permanent positions. Here's the key part. They get partial ownership of the mine, revenue sharing, and control over every aspect from the planning to environmental cleanup. Integra Resources stated they are committed to preserving Shoshone-Paiute culture, including funding language programs. As tribal chairman Brian Mason told reporters, quote, without language, the culture dies, end quote. The company gets something valuable too, regulatory certainty and local expertise that reduces project risk, anything a CEO would like. And speaking of CEOs, George Salamis called it good business that benefits everyone. This partnership shows how respect for sovereignty and smart resource development can work together. Instead of leaving valuable minerals in the ground, we can put them to productive use while honoring our neighbors' rights and creating prosperity for all Idahoans. And as a fun side note, our congressional delegation supports this historic agreement that strengthens our domestic mineral supply chain. Which we have given you a ton of awesome stories, and it would be a shame if only you heard about them. So please don't hesitate to share this episode. Your shares help us keep you and others informed about what is happening in the state of Idaho. And speaking of money and labor, the Idaho Department of Labor says our wages hit about $28.10 per hour this year, up about 5.1% from last year. That sounds great, right? But some of us don't feel like we are seeing this in our paychecks. As for what's happening on this, high earners are pulling the average way up. Managers are making on average about $51.85 per hour, while food service workers are earning just $15.07 on average. Computer jobs are paying $48.89 per hour, but retail workers are only getting about $24.08 per hour. Now, all these numbers sound amazing until you think about inflation. When you mix millionaire salaries with minimum wage jobs, the averages look much better than it is for most people. Kind of a little bit of math class there. The medium age, what the person in the middle class is actually earning, only rose to $22.34 per hour. That's more realistic for most of us. Idaho did outpace other states with about 8.3% of weekly wage growth, ranking third nationally, very encouraging to see. But we still lag behind California and Washington in actual dollars. Rising costs are forcing employers to pay more or lose workers. It's probably the main pressure. Our conservative legislature noted when opposing their own pay raises, quote, "Most Idahoans are working hard just to keep up with rising inflation," end quote. But with all that said, the numbers do look great on paper, but the more important part is, are they helping families buy groceries and pay rent? That is the real question. And closing out on a bittersweet note, last month we lost a giant in the Christian conservative movement. Dr. James Dobson died on August 21st at his Colorado Springs home. He was 89 years old. For those that aren't familiar with him, for nearly 5 decades, Dobson stood firm for biblical family values when our culture kept drifting away from God's design. He founded Focus on the Family in 1977, the name might ring a bell, which grew into a ministry reaching millions worldwide through radio, books, and resources. Many of us, as probably can guess, grew up with Adventures in Odyssey, which Dobson's ministry created. He also brought C.S. Lewis's stories to life through radio productions that shaped countless childhoods. But Dobson didn't just entertain. He equipped parents to raise their children according to Scripture. His 1970 book, Dare to Discipline, sold over 3.5 million copies and challenged the permissive parenting trends of that era. While secular media often attacked his biblical positions on marriage and family, Dobson never wavered from what Scripture teaches. He advised multiple presidents and helped secure Supreme Court justices who eventually overturned Roe v. Wade. Dobbs fought the good fight and finished strong. His legacy lives on in millions of families who he helped strengthen with God's truth. And speaking of truth, I need to go so I can write more of it for you guys. Thank you for listening to the entire report. I sincerely hope you found it enjoyable and valuable. If you'd like the Midweek Report, make sure to check out our other content. Also, if we missed any important points or provided incorrect information, please feel free to reach out to us via email or on Twitter by tweeting us at @LocalYocal Idaho. With the small team we have, we're not able to cover everything, but we do our best to cover the most interesting and important stories. Thank you for your continued support and assistance. That's all for now. I wish you a fantastic rest of your week. Godspeed.